Welcome to PatsCast. Your New England Patriots now sit atop first place in the AFC East, with the Buffalo Bills losing on Monday night, the Patriots holding the tiebreaker at 4-2 after winning in Buffalo last week. When the Patriots brought in Mike Vrabel and you had Drake May heading into year two, I thought maybe, whether it's later this year or next year, they could eventually get to this point. I just didn't see it happening quite this quickly, but the team's ahead of schedule. Drake May is certainly ahead of schedule, and the Patriots, it raises the question, can they actually win this division when all is said and done, right? We know they have a very easy schedule the rest of the way, the easiest in the NFL. They still get to play the Jets twice. The Jets are 0-6 right now. It's clearly not working out with Aaron Glenn as their head coach, who denied a head coaching interview in New England for whatever reason. The Dolphins, they aren't much better. They're at 1-5, probably going to fire their head coach either at the end of the season or some way midway through the season. And then Buffalo clearly is having their own struggles. They had some struggles on Monday night, and we saw what happened against New England the week before. And can you just imagine being a Buffalo Bills fan right now? You know, after you struggled for so many years, 2 decades, against Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, then, Brady leaves for Tampa, Belichick fizzles out in New England. You got the quarterback, arguably the best in the league, was the MVP last season. You come so close to the Super Bowl, you just can't seem to get over the hump against Kansas City, who's recently taken a step back. Maybe this is the year for Buffalo. And then suddenly, Drake May, who 2 weeks ago nobody outside of New England had on their radar as a potential elite quarterback, goes into Buffalo, wins the game, garners national attention, and then has a near flawless game on the road against New Orleans a week later, and he's now in the MVP conversation. The Patriots have the quarterback, and the Bills, they have this incredible dual-threat quarterback in Josh Allen, incredible arm strength, can make plays with his legs, big-bodied, physical guy, and then the Patriots go out and get basically a carbon copy of that quarterback. It's hilarious being a Bills fan. Their window is closing, clearly. And if the Patriots win the division, maybe the window is closed. And look at the Patriots' schedule. Like I said, they have the easiest schedule in the NFL. I really only count 4 legitimately challenging opponents the rest of the way. They have Atlanta coming up at home in about 3 weeks. Atlanta beat Buffalo last night. I don't think they're the same team on the road as they are at home. They got swept, I believe, on the road against Kansas City, or against Carolina a few weeks ago. But Atlanta, they're getting things together. Honestly, they should have won that game against Buffalo. It should have been a 2-possession game the whole game. They just coached their way into being a close game, not taking field goals, not good clock management at the end of the first half. I think their coaching could be better, but that Atlanta game is going to be challenging, but I think the Patriots will be the favorite, assuming they're able to take care of business these next couple of weeks. Then they go on the road to Tampa the week after that. Obviously, they're not going to be the favorite there if Tampa continues to play the way they are. I think Baker Mayfield is the MVP favorite at this point in the season. Going on the road into Tampa, they have elite receivers, but, they're banged up right now. We'll see what they look like in 3 weeks, but it's not like the Bucs are going to be favored by a touchdown heading into that game. Patriots should be able to keep it close and maybe even potentially win that game. They have a road game later in the season against Baltimore. I'm not writing off the Ravens quite yet. I know they're 1-5. Eventually they're going to get Lamar Jackson back. They've had a very difficult schedule, have one of the easiest schedules the rest of the way. I think there's a real chance they're in the playoff hunt at that point in the season. So going on the road there, even if they're not a great team, is going to be a tough matchup. And then, of course, Buffalo coming into New England one last time. So the only game here that seems like a reach is probably Tampa and maybe Buffalo if they get it together, or Baltimore if they start to turn things around. But their defense is atrocious, and I really don't see that being fixed this season. And then you look at the Bills. For a first-place schedule, it's a fairly easy schedule, but it's still a first-place schedule. They have, I count, 5 challenging games the rest of the way. They have Kansas City coming into Buffalo in a couple of weeks. The Chiefs, I think, are back to being the favorite in the AFC. They are the dynasty Patriots of the modern era, right? They may get off to a difficult start. They're well coached. They have the best quarterback, arguably, in the NFL. I think Kansas City is going to continue to be the team to beat even if it looked like they were taking a step back this season. But it is at home, so that will help Buffalo. Same thing, they're going to be at home against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Shortly after that, we know Tampa Bay, as I said, is playing very well right now. I think if that game were to take place next week, Tampa would probably be the favorite. And then, a couple of road games that I think Buffalo should be favored in, but aren't, easy wins. They have to go on the road against the Houston Texans. The Texans are not great this year. I think C.J. Stroud is not the quarterback we thought he was, but still going down to Houston is going to be a tough one. They're going to be fighting for their lives. They have a road game against the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're in first place in the AFC North right now. It seems to be working out well with Aaron Rodgers. And even, when they've had all these mediocre teams over the years, going into Pittsburgh is a tough game. They always play up to the level of their competition. And then the Bills have a home game also against the defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. So, three of those games, Kansas City, Tampa, Philadelphia, I know they're at home, but hard to see the Bills potentially being the favorite after the way they've played the last couple of weeks. Have a couple of tough road matchups, whereas the Patriots have a much easier schedule the rest of the way. They just have to go on the road against Tampa. That's really the only legitimately challenging matchup other than playing Buffalo once more. And look, the Bills, they're not the same team that they were last year. They are a very one-dimensional offense, right? They don't have elite receivers. They used to, but their elite receiver is now in New England. They made it work last year because the offensive line was better with Josh Allen, and he was able to spread the ball around, but the O-line just has not stepped up in Buffalo this year. I like Khalil Shakir as a receiver, but he wouldn't be a number one most places. Their entire offense really is dependent on Dalton Kincaid, and we saw what happened on Monday without him in the lineup. You need Dalton Kincaid to constantly have big games, or Josh Allen has to make plays with his legs. And that's harder to do when defenses don't feel forced to cover an elite receiving core. You're able to spy Josh Allen a lot more, and that's what Atlanta did on Monday night, and that's the reason why the Bills ultimately lost that game. And I know they have James Cook and a solid running game. Buffalo really should have run the ball a lot more on Monday, but against teams like New England, who are great at stopping the run, he's a non-factor. He was a non-factor on Sunday night a couple of weeks ago. So, you can take out the running game against Buffalo, and then all you have to worry about is stopping Josh Allen and covering Dalton Kincaid, which they didn't do a very good job a couple of weeks ago, but Patriots are just getting going, right? They're just getting going. And look, they have plenty of issues of their own, of course, but in spite of these issues, the Patriots are still winning football games. They can't run the ball worth a damn right now, and it doesn't matter because Drake May is consistently putting up quarterback ratings above 100. He was in the 140s and the 150s in games against Carolina and New Orleans. He was over 100 against the Bills. As I said, teams can't run against the Patriots. They're great at stopping the run. I think the passing defense could be a lot better, but the issue is not covering elite receivers because you still have Christian Gonzalez who can match up against anyone. I think Carlton Davis has been a little bit of a disappointment, but pretty damn good as a number 2 corner. It's really more about defending tight ends and number 3 receivers, which honestly is why I didn't love that corner blitz to start the game against New Orleans where you sent Carlton Davis and force poor Kyle Duggar to cover Chris Olave downfield. Like, stop getting cute. Just run man. You have the weapons to do it. Just make it work, and you're going to be able to stop some of these offenses. But the big thing here is all of these issues that the Patriots have, they're very correctable, and they really often have to do with sort of the give and take of the NFL. Part of the reason the Pats can't run the football right now is because teams are continuing to stack the box. They do not, even New Orleans last week, who I think ran a little bit more cover 2 than we've seen in recent weeks, but they still went into that game not respecting the Patriots wide receivers. They paid a little close attention to Stephon Diggs, but after what Kayshon Boutte did, after what Demario Douglas did on Sunday, teams are going to have to adjust, or else Drake May is going to continue to put up these incredible numbers. So teams right now, they don't respect the Patriots receivers, and they probably should. They have the single high safety. They bring the other safety down in the box to stop the run. And because of that, the Patriots just are ineffective on the ground. Eventually, and I'm shocked that we haven't seen it yet, defenses will go back to a more modern cover 2 to stop Drake May in the passing game. But that's just going to open up the running game a lot more, and the Patriots are going to have more to work with on offense. So even if teams make that adjustment, I don't necessarily think the Patriots are going to be worse. Drake May just may not continue putting up MVP numbers. He won't have as many open receivers. But look, teams are going to have to make that adjustment. Drake May is more than willing on Sunday to throw the deep ball. He threw 2 to Demario Douglas. He threw 1 to Diggs. He threw 1 to Mac Hollins. He's unleashed at this point. He's figured out how to work within the structure of the Josh McDaniels offense while opening it up for him to make explosive plays downfield. Eventually, these defenses are going to correct for that, and the running game's going to get back to what we thought was, one of the best units in the NFL. Obviously, they don't have Antonio Gibson now. They called up Jennings from the practice squad, but it's hard for any team to run against defenses that are just stacking the box, and Drake May just has a feast against those types of defenses. So that's going to need to change, and I think the Patriots offense will continue to evolve once that changes. But more importantly, it's not so much that the Patriots can make these corrections, it's that they have about a dozen new starters this year. They turned over, I think, more than half of the roster. They have a new head coach, a new-ish offensive coordinator who's running a very different style of offense compared to what he did with Tom Brady, just to take advantage of the elite traits of Drake May. They have a new defensive coordinator who isn't even the DC right now. Zach Kerr is filling in play calling duties. They're just starting to figure things out, right? I mean, rusty as hell, not on the same page week 1 against Vegas. They barely squeaked by against the Miami Dolphins, who is a legitimately awful team in week 2. And then week 3, they started to get a little bit more productive, but of course the 5 turnovers prevented the Patriots from even being competitive in that game. And even then, it was still close. But then, a few weeks ago against Carolina, they started to get things together, had a big blowout victory, go on the road to Buffalo, pick up a big upset victory on Sunday night. Now they're on the radar of the national sports media. And then you have a trap game in New Orleans. I know New Orleans is not a great team, but their offense isn't terrible. Spencer Rattler's not terrible. I think they have good defensive coaching. And I don't care who you're playing. Winning back-to-back road games in the NFL is very difficult, and especially going into the Louisiana Superdome or Caesar Superdome, whatever they call it now, and winning in that environment. I mean, that place was loud. And they go in there and escape with a victory. And in a game they really should have won by at least 2 scores, but they're still stacking up wins. And I think more importantly, they have a locker room that is extremely supportive of one another, and they have their heads in the right place. If you caught Mike Vrabel's post-game speech on Sunday, he told the team, you need to be celebrating more. I've never heard that for a modern NFL coach with a Gen Z locker room. I sound like an old boomer, but with the TikToks and the touchdown dances, it doesn't seem like a lack of celebration is an issue in the league, but it was for the Patriots on Sunday. They were in the locker room. Stephon Diggs walking around, being a real leader, saying, we got to correct these mistakes. We have to go into Tennessee next week and play a lot better than this. And Mike Vrabel said, even if it's just for a couple of hours, guys, a win is a win. Celebrate this victory. We have all week to focus on correcting these mistakes. I've never seen that in an NFL team. Even the Brady-Belichick years, it was, I think Brady had that mindset. Belichick certainly had that mindset. He didn't care much for celebrations, but this is a team right now that is just starting to figure things out. They're just starting to get things together. They come out with an impressive road victory against New Orleans, and they're thinking about, here are the mistakes we need to correct before they've even taken off their uniform in the locker room. The culture is there. Mike Vrabel has built this team in his image and is now pulling back a little bit to tell the team, you got to celebrate the victories when you get them. So that's amazing to see. We've come so far since the 4-13 Gerard Mayo season. We've come so far since the 4-13 Bill Belichick bungled season with Bill O'Brien as offensive coordinator. We've come so far since Matt Patricia was the offensive coordinator in New England alongside Joe Judge with Mac Jones as your quarterback. This team, the sky's the limit at this point. And additionally, Drake May is going to keep getting better, right? I'm not saying he's going to sustain the numbers that he's putting up right now, but he's playing MVP level football. I think Baker's probably the favorite right now to win MVP, but Drake May's in the top 5 of that conversation. And you have to remember, he's only started 18 games at this point in his career. He's played one full season in one game as a starter. In fact, if you take out the game last year, I think it was the Jets, where May got injured early in the game, Jacoby Brissett finished it out. You take out that game, you take out the garbage time game against Buffalo at the end of the season where they pulled May after one series. He hasn't even played a full season as a starter at this point. He's already playing MVP level football. And it's hard to say, like, you look back at the 2024 draft, which of course was a great quarterback class. Jaden Daniels and Drake May, you know, you ask around, I think probably most people, ignorant people in my opinion, would still probably take Jaden Daniels. But Jaden Daniels is what, 3 years older than Drake May? Drake May's clearly having a better season so far. May might be the better quarterback, has a much higher ceiling. I think he's better than Caleb Williams. I know Caleb played pretty well and won the game on Monday night, but I don't think anyone would take Caleb Williams over Drake May at this point. Michael Penix, J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix. No one's going to take those guys. I like Bo Nix, but no one's going to take those guys over Drake May. So, again, if defenses make the adjustments, I don't think May's going to continue to put up these numbers if he's consistently going up against a cover 2. But as I said, it's going to open up new parts of the offense, and the Patriots are going to be able to have a more balanced attack, which is, you know, what they're going to need if they want to beat good teams. The few remaining good teams on their schedule, or even make a run in the postseason, you know, they're going to have a more balanced attack. But, you know, it's not working with these defenses. You know, you can't stack the box against New England. You can stop the run, but you can't stop Drake May in those situations. So, you know, I think the biggest worry I had heading into the season about May was, is he going to be productive in those high-pressure, clutch situations, you know, late in the game? You know, he had 2 game-winning drives, right? The first one was technically a game-winning drive against Buffalo, but, you know, the game against Miami doesn't count as a game winner, but it was, essentially. So he already has that on his resume this season. And he's been a lot better in the pocket. And look at his numbers, too. Look at his passer ratings in, you know, gotta have it, explosive play situations. On deep throws, more than 20 air yards downfield. He has a 156.3 passer rating. I don't know what the cap is for a passer rating, but that's about as close to perfect as you're going to get. That's number 1, of course, in the NFL. Against the blitz, he has a 130 passer rating. Second highest in the NFL. We saw New Orleans do that on Sunday. They said, all right, we're going to get after this quarterback. He's young. He's essentially still a rookie. We're going to get him under some pressure and really get in his head. Drake May just picked him apart. New Orleans said in the second half, all right, we got to stop doing that because this isn't working. And the defense, to their credit, played a lot better. But you can't blitz against May. You know, he knows where to go with the football. He can even make plays with his legs against the blitz. I mean, that's why he's second highest in the NFL, which is ridiculous for a player this young. Plays without play action, a 109 passer rating, third highest in the NFL. When he has more than 2.5 seconds to throw, he's 6th highest in the NFL with a 106 passer rating. Even under pressure for a young quarterback, he's still ranked number 8 in the NFL. So his worst metric in these passer rating situations is 8th overall under pressure. And I think what's really impressive about Drake May is he only has 131 scramble yards at this point in the season. You know, we all said, like, look, he's a dual threat quarterback. You want him to use his legs when he has to, but he needs to be a pocket passer first. You need to be a pocket passer first to be an effective quarterback in the NFL. You know, we saw Lamar Jackson as a rookie running all over the place. He didn't really become the MVP level player that Lamar Jackson is until he became an elite pocket passer. Drake May's done that in like a couple of weeks. It's wild. I mean, what did we talk about on the podcast last week after the Buffalo game? We talked about how when the pocket is collapsing, Drake May still sometimes has the tendency to drop his head, drop his eyes, and that leads to sacks. It leads to fumbles, as we've seen many times over the last couple of years. It leads to just short 1 or 2 yard gains that don't really go anywhere. He fixed that in a week. he certainly made plays outside the pocket in New Orleans, but most of those big explosive plays, the pocket was collapsing and he stepped up and made those throws. I mean, he had obviously 2 great deep throws to Demario Douglas, who was wide open. One of those was called back. There was the offensive pass interference that wasn't exactly an offensive pass interference on Stephon Diggs. That was an incredible throw, like 60 yards down the sideline. Went back the next play. They should have called defensive pass interference against Mac Hollins. Basically the same throw, placed it in the perfect spot, about 60 yards downfield. He had 2 incredible throws to Kayshon Boutte. I mean, there was that throw into the end zone where he wasn't even really open, lobbed it over the defender where only Kayshon Boutte could get to it on a 50-50 ball, really. And of course, the game-clinching play to Kayshon Boutte, who also wasn't open on the comeback, that clinched the game. And I don't even think any of those were the best throws of the game. I think the best throw in New Orleans, Drake May, I think it was 3rd and 11 early in the fourth quarter, was under a ton of pressure, kept his eyes downfield, kept his head up, stepped up in the pocket, his body was turned to the right, and he slingshotted it to the left to Mac Hollins, who also wasn't really open, for a first down. And I honestly thought that was the best play of the game for Drake May. Not these deep bombs downfield, but they've opened him up. He can make these explosive plays, and that's what you need to do in the NFL, is win by making explosive plays, right? Like, not everyone can have Tom Brady lead the team down the field on 15, 16, 17 play drives and expect him not to make a mistake. No, you need quarterbacks that are going to have chunk plays. And so far, up until last week, Patriots were still kind of playing that, death by 1,000 paper cuts Josh McDaniels offense. They took the leash off Drake May and were able to make explosive plays downfield. So May's going to keep getting better. That's the amazing thing. That doesn't mean the numbers are going to keep getting better because, like I said, the defenses are going to make adjustments. They're going to prevent him from rolling to his right. They're going to have 2 safeties deep downfield. They're going to make it a little bit more difficult for him, but that also just gives the Patriots a lot more options on offense to run the football and be a little bit more creative. So I absolutely think this team can win the division. They have an easier schedule than Buffalo. They already beat Buffalo on the road. Going to be interesting when they come into Foxborough the final weeks of the season to see if the Patriots can maintain that or if they've even improved as a team, which, again, I think they will. I think the culture is in the right place. The team's headed in the right direction. The chemistry is being built. It's even being built between Demario Douglas and Drake May. We've talked about how that's an issue. Efton Chisholm gets activated on the roster. Suddenly, it's kicking around in the back of Demario's head like, okay, I got to learn how to make some catches against zone defenses. He settled in nicely Sunday against New Orleans and looked like the Demario Douglas that we saw each of the last couple seasons. So, curious to hear from you in the comments. Do you think the Patriots will win the division? And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, hit the notification bell, or subscribe if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We'll be back very soon with more New England Patriots coverage.